Thomas Kramer came into town, and also a very interesting cat. He started investing more in the stuff below Fifth Street, and he opened up a club called Club Hell, and it was like, the Devil's Den, but also a very cool place, and sure had a good lot of fun with it.
Club Hell, when you entered through the pearly gates of hell and you came inside on the main floor, that's where we had the restaurant, we had the main bar outside, you had the patio with beautiful palm trees and a bar that were wrapped around in snakes, different color lit snake heads leading up the tree. Once you were received by one of the hosts and asked to go to the second floor, that's where the real fun began. That's where you had the 7 deadly sins. One of the most favorite rooms was called the Lust Room. It was all white with a beautiful bed inside, like from the Egyptian days, and there would be two women making love to each other, and there was a big neon sign in red outside that said Lust. From there you went out to the Envy Room and the Avarice, which was all like mustard yellow. Don't understand why, but it was, and it was all like old furniture in there, and Sloth and Wrath, and you went into the Devil's Den. So while you made your rounds around the second floor, if you were lucky enough, you got invited to go to the third floor. Third floor was the ultimate floor. That's where you had the Madonna Lounge. Once you got into the Madonna Lounge, there was no more money. You couldn't buy anything up there. Everything was free. It was mostly celebrities. It was very quiet, but it was the first elitist room, I believe, that ever existed on the beach of that level.
Well, the Hell stuff, it all started actually, Thomas was not a club person. He was a developer, and he bought all this land, and he had this building which he wasn't able to knock down because city of South Beach wouldn't let him do it. And so he decided to open a club. And one night we were at a restaurant, my girlfriend and I at the time, Michelle, and she met Thomas. And they were chatting, and he kind of threw the idea there of a club, and she said, "It's fabulous. I used to run clubs in New York." Next thing I know, we got a phone call from Thomas's office saying, "We want to see Michelle. Thomas wants to talk to her." That was the next day. Next thing we know, she comes back from the meeting. She says, "Thomas offered me a job to open up Club Hell." I said, "Well, what's Club Hell?" He says, "Well, he has this building. He wants to open it." And I said, "What's the budget?" He said, "Well, a couple million, but it didn't seem to be a problem what it would cost. He just wanted the club, and he wants to name it Hell. And he wants me to put the team together." And she said, "Well, who would I do as a promoter?" Had a promotion. Steven Zia said, one of the best in New York. And we went down the line. And Steven recommended the DJ, Mark Leventhal. He also recommended the designer, Norman, which was a genius at creating something out of nothing, which the building was nothing.
One of the reasons I came down here was because of Club Hell, which Thomas Kramer opened, and it was quite the spectacular opening.
I was invited down to do the Club Hell with my friend in New York, Norman Gosney. He got the job being the art director and working with Kramer, and so he called me down to do a bunch of imagery projection. It was called Hell, and he wanted me to do a projection of a devil that would appear to morph into different imagery and stuff. So I made a centerpiece for the big dance room in the middle of a big devil. I met a guy named Clive Promouse.
Club Hell was a fantasy world brought together by various different people, but I think one of the creative people was Norman Gosney, who was an English artist, a designer who lived on the penthouse of the Chelsea Hotel.
Well, I met Norman in London right after he graduated from the Royal Academy of Art, and one of his first jobs was the Houses of the Holy Cover, and he went on to do McCartney sets for his tour afterwards, and Prince, and design Area and all that, and we were friends for a long time, and I always liked he just seemed to fit the mold of Hell. Thomas Kramer gave me $100,000 and said, "Buy him a first-class ticket if he's that good and bring him down," and Norman came down, and the rest is history.
If you were going to do an event in Hell, if you were going to do a nightclub in Hell, what would it look like? And through great creative talent, Jeff Vaughan, myself, yourself. We built Hell, the 7 deadly sins, which we were all guilty of, and just built this total fantasy land for adults to go and play. And some great talent was brought down from New York: Stephen Z, Mark Defferman, Mark's sister Leventhal.
Thomas had $3 billion back then. And with that kind of money, you can't stop somebody today, never mind in 1992. And what was going on in South Beach. And South Beach was really hungry for someone that big. So you can actually say that he was one of the starting developers of that magnitude. Was he a horror? He was absolutely a horror.
And opening night, we had 5,000 people standing outside that couldn't come in, and they stood outside.
Opening night of Hell, he insulted everyone from the Cubans to the gays to the Jews.
He said, "I want no more faggots, no more Jews, and no more niggers in my club." And, you know, standing outside was Versace and all these other people, like, you know, on their way coming in, they all turned around and walked away.
Remember Thomas Kramer standing at the door when Versace walked up with some of his friends and basically blurted out, "I don't want any of these fat fucking fags in my club." And Louis Canales stood there with a look of horror on his face, and Versace, I don't think he's ever been spoken to like that in his life. Suddenly turned around and stormed off with his little entourage, and it was a very funny moment. Yeah.
And half those press people didn't even get in the door because Thomas had a fit at the front door. He saw a couple ugly and fat people and he lost it. He just said, "Why are all these fat people? What are all these? Don't let him in, don't let him in."
For the grand opening of Hell, we rented out a plane, an American Airlines DC-10, and we flew down 181 New Yorkers, influential New Yorkers like Patrick McMullen, Michael Musto, Nicky Camp, who was running the Rock and Roll Church at the time, Electric Dave, Tommy Pooch. We flew all these people down and picked them up in vintage limousines. The grand opening of Hell was a spectacle like never before seen in South Beach. I believe 8,000 people showed to the opening. We had a fireworks show that costed almost $1 million by the Grucci brothers, the same people that do the 4th of July Macy's fireworks. It was all choreographed to music. We had a 48-foot size copy of the face of Hell, which was actually Jack Nicholson from the Joker. That was the logo. We had that recreated in lighting.
Fireworks from the Grucci brothers and all this craziness, mayhem at openings back then that was just not thought of now and not done. And it was much more of a production, much more of a show, much more of an amazing time than you could ever imagine of what the club openings are like now.
We had 2 stands built, and there was a unlimited fountain of Moet, and this went on forever and ever until they were led back to the club, and they were led back by a guy dressed as half man, half horse with a prosthetic cock, and he was pointing everybody to Club Hell, and it was just mayhem. There was a word that Madonna was going to come in, and David Lee Roth from my office told the guys at the front door not to let her in, and it was just madness, and Thomas didn't help with his ideas of how to run the door and telling Gloria and Emilio Estefan that it's a great party, not so many Cubans there, and meantime he's talking to the Cuban icons on the beach.
I did a party at Hell when it first opened, one of the first nights, and I signed a contract with Thomas Kramer. It's a funny story actually, and we did Friday nights there, me and Gary James, and the first night I did it, we got a lot of negative comments from people. And I think a week later is when that big New Times story came out, where he was like on the cover and like a, you know, with a dollar bill with the devil ears and everything. And I didn't, at the time, want the association with it. So I remember going to Thomas Kramer's office and I was like, you know, we're gonna stop doing the Friday night here. And he's like, his lawyers came and said, funny kid, you think this contract only works so if you don't pay me, if I don't pay you, you could sue me? Well, it also means you can't quit. You're forced to continue. So I was like, what a nightmare! We're gonna lose like all our friends and clientele if we're still like associated with this club. It was like really like bad.
When I look in retrospective, what Thomas really wanted to do is not really be a club owner. He wanted to put South Beach on the map. And until then, South Beach was kind of a nickel and dime kind of a place. It was wonderful, it was a little village, but nobody really put serious money and raised the bar to like a New York level kind of promotion and club format and advertising with the money behind it.
Club Hell is not famous for what it was as a club. Club Hell should be famous and remembered for what it did for the attitude and the actual knowledge of South Beach, especially up north. We had enough resources, which people didn't have on the beach before that, to go a level much higher than anyone else. So we promoted actual South Beach because Thomas wanted to build these massive homes, condominiums, hotels, and all that. At that time, he was buying up most of the South Beach. He owned most of South Point at that point. The Portofino Group in 1991 was by far the largest real estate group that existed on South Beach.
And that's what he wanted to do. And he wanted to put it on the map because if he put South Beach on the map, his development would be on the map too. So he was using it as a PR tool to actually get the press out there. Who's going to advertise just a building in the 90s? South Beach. Nobody really knew it. I mean, Florida was a place where old people go and die. You know? That's what the perception was in those days.
We had a party for the mayor of Miami Beach. We donated $300,000 to the mayor for the finishing of the grammar school that the city couldn't finish in 3 years. We finished in 6 months. We gave him $300,000 for beautification of South Beach, where we redid all the lights on Washington Avenue. We also gave him $100,000 for wives and children of officers lost in action. So it left a really big impact on the beach. But the impact that it left worldwide on promotion of South Beach is the big thing that Hell did. And the 3 or 4 months while Hell lasted and the year while it was being built, all through Hurricane Andrew, is really what it's the main thing, the main legacy that Hell left behind.
Thomas wanted to make South Beach hot. He wanted to raise the bar. We had beautiful people on South Beach that came down from, the winters in New York. All the models, the photographers, all the promoters came down here. It was cheap to live, but he wanted to make it hot. He wanted to make it international. He wanted press everywhere, and he was going to pay for it. And he had no problem with it, but he wanted South Beach on the map. Not just locally in New York or in California. He wanted it in Germany, in France, in Japan. I mean, we put press everywhere. We hired publicists everywhere.
David Grant of Public Relations represented Club Hell in New York City, and then later on he opened up a post in South Beach, which also benefited South Beach because David at the time was one of the New York top PR people, and bringing him down to the beach just meant that there was more of us that were artistic moving down to the beach.
I was introduced to Thomas Kramer, the owner of Club Hell, by Mark Depinois and Stephen Z. And they kind of brought me in on it. And he was such an interesting character. There were plenty of stories circulating about him, from his days in Germany, and he was married to the Bruder heiress, who was the publishers for all the German editions of like Vogue and Cosmo. And so he arrived here and he was this huge personality. As the opening night was coming to date, I lined up Richard Johnson, who was the editor of Page 6 at the time of the New York Post, one of the hottest entertainment gossip columns in the country, it probably still is. And Michael Musto from the Village Voice, and Frank DiGiacomo, who was working for the Daily News at the time. Patrick McMullen came down. We were all anticipating this fantastic opening night. Thomas was opening up Hell in this old sort of dilapidated hotel called the Leonard Hotel. And as it was being built, and I was expecting these important people from New York, reporters, to come down, I was looking around, and all it really was floors with these small rooms based on the 7 deadly sins. And I thought, coming from New York and seeing all these fabulous nightclubs and dance clubs, and I thought, like, God, this is really not that beautiful or fantastic. Looks like it was put together with paste or something. In the back of my mind, I was a little afraid that people would say, this is kind of a dump. But it turned out pretty well.
Well, actually, the terrible thing about Club Hell is, sometimes when you go back to New York and you see beautiful clubs like Limelight and Studio 54, during the day they're beautiful. They're still got a wow, effect. Hell was, you saw it during the day and it really looked like a wreck. I mean, it really looked like a ruin, At night, with all the special effects and the lighting and all the experts we brought in, the sound, it came to life, just like Hell, And Norman was great with this, with the colors, with the designs, everything, the packaging. He was a genius at it. And also the way he managed the team, because he worked with all of us. And we rarely ever had arguments, rarely had friction. If there was friction, Thomas was usually the cause of it, because he was being eccentric about something. We repaint, when we were ready to open, we had a date. And he repainted the outside of the building 4 times because the tone of the brown wasn't right. So we had painters out there day and night repainting the building. But I don't think Thomas did it because I just want to be a club owner. I think it was a PR stunt to develop. And I think also he had issues with zoning and getting permissions to develop his land. And I figure that maybe with a club that's somewhat obnoxious, the local authorities might say, well, it's maybe better if you develop luxury condos than have a club called Hell,
Within those 3 years that I remember, from 92 to 94, Beach grew by leaps and bounds. Rebar, Groovejet, Bash, I can't even begin to name how many other places. And people like Nicola Ciervo and Bang, Rocco Corolla and Cesare Bruni. Doesn't matter how long it lasted, but he got the Gary James and the Radicals and the Leventhal's. He got everybody that was involved in that beach at that time went through this place somehow. You follow what I'm saying? And it was the first time that the celebrities really picked up on South Beach. I mean, they were here, but they weren't here on a level, because we used to fly them in. We used to fly the celebrities in. For instance, on Halloween, I had paid Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger, $10,000 to come and host my Halloween party. That we charged $100 to get in. No one ever heard of that in 1992. It was impossible, but we made it happen. It really expanded South Beach to the rest of the world and made it the Riviera that it is. Daily News, Richard Johnson, New York Post, none of this was ever being written about South Beach before Club Hell came along. There was a little bit, but not. Basically, if you were to start a Daytona Beach 500, and Hell would be the one that waved the flag to start. Is basically what had happened, in my opinion. Heavens to Betsy, Hell closes about 4 months later after he went through major changes. One of the major reasons, people don't think that he closed just because of the policies and all that. No. Hell closed because Thomas Kramer brought this so-called expert from New York City, this woman that was doing a club in New York, who was a friend of his wife's. And to appease her, he brought her down. She came in, she started restructuring the walls of Hell. Never asked the city planning board or the architectural information or anything like that how to do this, and eventually we were down to 1 floor, the main floor. We couldn't use the 2nd or the 3rd floor until other things were fixed, and eventually the club wound up dying and closing.
So he's brilliant. He saw the big picture. All of us were looking at the small picture, and he saw the big picture. And why did it close? It's not because there wasn't going to be any business. We were booked a year in advance, private parties, all this stuff we handled. And he closed, he brought in. He wanted to shut it down. And he figured he wouldn't be able to just close the door. I think he needed to do something so the city would have to condemn the building, so he would have to knock it down so he could build luxury condos.
One of the problems is that the kitchen was too heavy for the foundation, so that cracked.
And make a lot more money than running a club. How's that? My personal opinion.
Occupancy went from like 600-700 to about 120, and that was the end of Club Hell.
That's why he did it. Who's going to go in the 90s Spent 6 million, 7 million bucks on a lousy building in a nowhere land. I mean, below Fifth Street was nowhere land. Only somebody that had a vested interest in the future and the long term of things.